State. Joining us now, the Texas Republican Congressman Mike McCaul. He's the chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee that will hold this hearing later today. Chairman, thank you so much for joining us. Specifically, what answers are you looking for from General Milley and General McKenzie today?
Why did this go so wrong? I think they're going to set the record straight. They're free to tell their story now. They're not no longer within the Department of Defense. These are the two top generals who oversaw the evacuation. They will say there was no plan for evacuation. If you don't have a plan, you plan to fail. That's exactly what happened in Afghanistan. I think all roads lead to the State Department and the White House, and I think that's what you're going to hear from these two commanding officers today.
You mean you think they're going to blame the State Department and the White House for the failures of the U.S. withdrawal? Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. I think what they're going to say is that there was no evacuation plan. Now, the State Department, by law, has to request the evacuation plan. They didn't do that until Kabul was actually falling and the embassy was being evacuated. That led to the chaos, the drama. It also led to the Abbey Gate bombing, the suicide bomber that killed 13 service members. Many of the families, by the way, Wolf, will be present at this hearing today. And I can tell you they are not happy with this president. They don't think he's ever publicly apologized to them or even stated the names of their deceased, the fallen, their children who were killed that fateful day.
I know you previously threatened Chairman McCaul to hold the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, in contempt of Congress over documents related to the U.S. military withdrawal from Afghanistan, documents he has since agreed to send you. Did your office receive all of them, and how will they figure into your investigation?
We did, and this was the second time I had to go down this road. I told the Secretary it's not a conversation I want to be having, but you're not complying with congressional subpoenas as required by law. So the first one was the descent cable. Imagine the embassy in Kabul as it's getting ready to fall and the Taliban's moving in. We had 23 employees, an extraordinary number, crying for help, essentially. We need to get out of here. It's going to get overrun by the Taliban. We need to remove employees and the documents and destroy classified documents, which, by the way, were not all destroyed. And then secondly, the notes to the after-action report were not produced. And a second time going through contempt proceedings, we got those documents. I have to say, Wolf, we're sorting through the classified and unclassified, but needless to say, it's very revealing about what was happening on the ground at the time, a very consistent narrative of chaos, no plan, no direction from the White House, then leading to the Abbey Gate suicide bombing.
Are you prepared, Chairman, to hold any former or even current Biden administration officials accountable over the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan? And what would that look like if the answer is yes?
Well, I think somebody needs to be held accountable. In what form that takes, we'll see where the evidence goes in this matter. I'm a former federal prosecutor. I don't prejudge facts until they come in, but somebody has to be held accountable for this. Somebody has to say, I'm sorry for your child being, killed at Abbey Gate. And that really hasn't happened. And so I do think this will lead to accountability. It should. But, the fact of the matter is the commanding officers on the ground at that time were all promoted. There was no accountability within the DOD. In fact, also, Wolf, after the sniper testified that he had the suicide bomber in his sights and requested permission to engage him, he got no response from his commanding officer. That is a case where there's no accountability present. The DOD has yet to produce any of the documents that the chairman of Armed Services and myself have requested, including the sniper photos, which would confirm if this was indeed the suicide bomber. We also need to hear from the commanding officers on the ground that made these decisions, or lack thereof, in terms of dealing with ISIS-K and suicide bombers.
This will be a very important hearing because the U.S. has to learn the lessons. If there were major blunders that developed during the course of that withdrawal, the U.S. has to learn what happened to make sure it never happens again. I speak as a former Pentagon correspondent right now. While I have you, very briefly, Mr. Chairman, let me discuss with you Israel's war against Hamas in Gaza. The White House said yesterday that President Biden made clear to Prime Minister Netanyahu that a ground invasion of Rafah in southern Gaza would be a mistake, and that Israel should pursue more precise strikes on Hamas targets. Do you agree with that?
Well, as I said on Sunday, I do believe, as I was briefed on, that for Israel and the IDF to go after high-value targets in Hamas, Hamas high-value targets in Gaza, and that would be close to Rafah, that's where they are right now. It seems to me you don't have to do that with 100 tanks rolling in. You can do that in a very, from a special operator standpoint. And I believe, and I hope that's what Israel is contemplating, is to target these high-value targets of Hamas in Rafah. They're not going to stop until Hamas is eradicated, and they will not stop during Ramadan. But there's a difference between 100 tanks rolling in and special operators going in with a specific mission to take out high-value targets.
And very briefly, before I let you go, Mr. Chairman, I know you have a lot going on. I want to get your reaction to what former President Trump said yesterday, saying that any American Jewish person who actually votes for Democrats, in his word, that person hates their religion and everything about Israel, also hates everything about Israel. Do you condemn what the former president is saying?
Well, I think religion is a very personal matter. I think you got to leave politics out of it. But I will say, as I mentioned on Sunday, that even Chuck Schumer now is being impacted by the base of his own party. There's no longer this traditional alliance with Israel that we've seen in a bipartisan fashion ever in my terms in Congress over 20 years. Now you're seeing a faction within the Democratic Party that's more pro-Palestinian and anti-Israel. And I think that's a problem for the Democratic Party as they deal with their base.
But are you not prepared to condemn what Trump is saying about American Jews who are Democrats?
I can't comment on every Trump comment every time I go on CNN. I'd be talking till midnight tonight. So we'll suffice it to say it's a very personal matter, religion, and wouldn't be my words. But having said that, I understand the sentiment that the Democratic Party is not representing their values.
Congressman Mike McCaul, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Wolf. Thanks for having me.